Hello, good morning. I am here today to talk about progress in delivery of the Act, and more importantly to talk more widely about the benefits of delivering really strong, ambitious climate policies in Scotland and more widely. As John has nicely teed up, it's a very big 18 months or 2 years in the climate policy world. We have the Paris summit coming up in December, and that is going to be a big moment in terms of delivering a global climate change deal. It probably won't be perfect, but it'll be something concrete that we will be able to build on over time and progress on. We also have the UK elections and the Holyrood elections over the next 18 months. And we will also have the UK's 5th carbon budget coming out, so what the UK ambition is for the post-2027 phase, so broadly in line with the RPP3 timeline. And we will also have the next iteration of the RPP2, so the Report on Policies and Proposals 3, which will be coming out over the next 18 months. So there are a lot of processes for NGOs like WWF to influence and indeed contribute to in a collaborative way, as John has said. And we're working on a lot of different fronts at the moment to do so. I wanted to start by showing you a short video that's been prepared by Ridley Scott Associates. It's been sponsored by the Climate Coalition, which is the sister organisation of Stop Climate Chaos Scotland, and it's a coalition of a lot of NGOs working together to campaign for stronger action on climate change. So we'll see if this works. Fingers crossed.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate.
Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date.
Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines,
and oft is his gold complexion dimmed.
And every fair from fair sometimes declines,
by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed.
But thy eternal summer shall not fade,
nor lose possession of that fair thou owest,
nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade.
When in eternal lines to time thou growest.
So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see.
So long lives this,
and this gives life
to thee.
So I know that showing a video in many ways is a bit of a light way to start the day, but I just wanted to illustrate that we're working on many fronts at once to try and mobilise action on climate change, whether that's getting celebs to talk to the public and kind of motivate new and renewed interest, or, as I'll turn to now, working to expand the really dry, techie economic evidence base for strong climate change action. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the macroeconomics of climate change policy. So I'm really moving from poetry to prose here, and I apologise. So last year, we in WWF commissioned at a UK level a new report by Cambridge Econometrics on what the effects of strong climate change action would be at a UK level. And we did this because we think that the benefits of climate policy are still pretty poorly understood and articulated. So we wanted to see what the impacts of implementing the UK's 4th carbon budget would be, and that's the equivalent in Scotland broadly of the RPP2. So that came out in September, and the main finding overall is that strong, ambitious climate policy has really positive effects for the economy. Now, it was a UK study, but I think the findings are as relevant in Scotland as they are at a UK level. So what did the report actually find? First, that compared to a scenario where we didn't have strong, ambitious climate policy, GDP would increase by 1.1%, and that meant 5.7 billion additional revenue for the government. Households would also be better off by over £500 per year, so that's significant. And we would also have in the region of 190,000 new net jobs compared to a low ambition scenario. There are also some harder to quantify elements. We find it really hard to articulate the co-benefits of climate change policy sometimes, but in this we tried to quantify the impacts of reduced air pollution on NHS budgets, and we found that that would save in the region of 96 to 288 million per year. So the effect on the economy of strong, ambitious climate change action is clear. It's really positive. And I wanted to ask whether we're doing enough in Scotland to seize those benefits right now. Where are we in terms of delivering on the Climate Change Act? And I think John very nicely set out where things are at. We, to date, have had 3 missed targets. We've had good progress in some sectors, but it was very disappointing to meet those first 3, or to miss those first 3 targets. Some of that, of course, is because there have been some technical changes to carbon accounting, but I think we also struggle to see the very clear fingerprint or imprint of government policy across all sectors. In the summer, we worked with the government collaboratively to come up with some new policies that might help to start to plug the gap and come forward with some sort of compensation. But I think that there's a lot more that needs to happen if we are truly to get back on track to hitting future targets. That was a very short-term focused package, but we need much more long-term substantive change. The RPP2, it's a very comprehensive document, but I think it needs an update. It needs to flex and improve. It's not fit for purpose as it stands at the moment. There are assumptions in there, for instance, that the EU would move to a 30% emissions reduction target. That's not going to happen now, and that means that all of the future targets to 2020 will be missed. So we do need to accelerate the introduction of some of the proposals in the RPP2 into policies, and we also need to come forward with some new policies, and I really hope that the Cabinet subcommittee process that John has been talking about will help us to do that in the next few months. What we can't do is wait for the RPP3. That's a really important document, and it's going to be really central to Scotland's climate action moving forward, but we do need some compensatory action between now and 2016. We need to see a step change in our overall approach and ambition. A lot of the low-hanging fruit has been secured already, and in many ways the first 3 targets were the easy ones to deliver. From here to 2020, we need to deliver in the region of 1 million tonnes extra a year in emissions reductions, and that's not easy. So we do need some very ambitious approaches, which we know will deliver benefits. So what are the key areas that we need to see progress on? Well, firstly, I think overall heat is kind of the forgotten relation in this whole debate. It represents 50% of Scotland's emissions, broadly speaking, and at the moment only 3% of our heat is renewable. So we need to tackle heat on 2 fronts. Firstly, on energy efficiency. So energy efficiency is increasingly being funded by the Scottish Government in addition to various UK-wide programmes, and that's good. We were pleased to see an additional 20 million for energy efficiency in the final budget this year, and that brings it to around 100 million, so that's significant progress. But much more will need to be done because a lot of the UK-wide schemes have meant that there's been a big fall off in insulation rates. One of the interesting things that's going to be, skipped ahead. One of the interesting things that's going to be happening this year is that the government is going to be bringing forward a consultation on minimum standards in the private sector, so in the owner-occupied and private rental sector, following on from the social housing sector last year. So that would be to basically remove the worst performing homes which have very poor energy performance ratings from our building stock and regulate those out. That is going to be a very important moment, and I think we will, as NGOs, have to work very closely with government, with the public sector and with the private sector to sell the benefits of strong regulation on our housing stock. There's a risk that it could be perceived as unpopular, but what we really need to do is tackle fuel poverty and improve the carbon savings from our home, and that's one important way of doing it. The other thing that we're pushing on at the moment on the energy efficiency front is establishing energy efficiency as a national infrastructure priority project. So we need to see energy efficiency become much more like the way we approach big projects like building the A9 or dualling railways or whatever it is, that we have a much more integrated approach, a much more holistic approach, and a much more project-focused approach that is really, really large scale and commensurate with the challenge. On renewable heat, we have a target for 2020 of 11% renewable heat, and at the moment we're only at 3%, so there's a long way to go there. There's some progress on regulation of district heating, and there's a working group looking at that at the moment. But I think we need to support district heating in many other ways through the Scottish budget and through other mechanisms. So that's something that will need a lot more emphasis over the coming years. And we also need to find ways of rolling out renewable heating technologies in individual properties. On transport, which still represents around a quarter of Scotland's emissions, it's one area where the RPP2 is, we would see, very weak. There is basically no Scottish level policy on transport in the RPP2. And while we're doing some, there are some good initiatives, some more money for active travel infrastructure, walking and cycling and the like, and some money going towards the Smarter Choices, Smarter Places travel planning behaviour change programme, we will need to see much more emphasis on the transport side of the picture if we're going to really get to grips with our emissions. Particularly, we need to make sure that our transport infrastructure that we're putting in place is going to work for Scotland's future, not just for Scotland's past. We need to make sure that we're locking in the right decisions now that will put us on the pathway to delivering our climate change acts, and also that will underpin the kind of behaviour change I think that John was talking about. One of the collaborative solutions-oriented things that WWF is working on at the moment is the establishment of a low-carbon infrastructure task force, which we have been setting up over the last few months, and which is going to be taken forward by an independent chair and will have an independent function. And what that task force does is bring together key players from the infrastructure life cycle in Scotland, so from the Institution of Civil Engineers, the Green Investment Bank, the Scottish Government or observers, Pinsent Masons, Oxfam, and a whole range of other different stakeholders. And the task force is seeking to identify the type of projects that Scotland will need to see to realise the targets and the benefits of a low-carbon economy for 2030, 2040 and 2050. So that we don't necessarily just always go to the default option of building another road, but that we can get the district heating networks and the public transport infrastructure that we need for the future, and deliver all those win-wins for Scotland that I was talking about at the beginning. I started by saying what a critical period it is for climate change policy. I'm sure there are a lot of people in this room who will be working on the design of RPP3, but also on the delivery, the real-world delivery of our climate change ambitions. We're hoping to see some really positive, ambitious policies coming through, both this year and as RPP3 develops. And the reason I put Nicola Sturgeon up here is that that will need the strongest political leadership that we can get. We need to get as good as we can at selling the message that climate change is a really good thing for the Scottish economy and for society. We need leadership from the First Minister, who is speaking here at the opening of WWF's offices, where she actually said some really good things on climate policy, which was very reassuring. And also from the likes of the Cabinet Subcommittee, the Climate Change Delivery Board, and the Public Sector Climate Leaders Forum. But of course, that has to filter right across Scottish society in the public and private sectors too. We need to get better at sharing the evidence base we have that climate change action is a good thing. And I think as the RPP3 is prepared, I hope it gets a lot better at counting the benefits, actually quantifying the benefits of climate policy, as well as describing the costs, which I think it does far too much, well not too much, it had to. In the RPP2 we weren't able necessarily to describe the benefits, but I think we have to get better at quantifying those next time around so that we can sell it to the public. Put this slide up, I'm sure many of you may have seen it before, but it's just to summarise what I've been saying. Climate change policy is a good thing. It delivers lots of win-wins for Scotland, whether that's warmer homes, reduced energy bills, cleaner air, healthier lifestyles, more money in our pockets, higher GDP. So I really hope over the next 18 months to 2 years that we can work with the Scottish Government, the public sector and the private sector to see really good, really creative policies coming forward, and we will work very collaboratively to do that. Thank you.